When Sam first crossed the threshold of his dorm, he felt mixed feelings: joy at a new stage in his life and a slight anxiety due to the unusual surroundings. The building was old, with cracked walls that seemed to hold thousands of secrets from previous residents. His room was on the fourth floor, a corner room with a small window overlooking an abandoned sports field. Sam was a freshman at this university, which meant he didn't have any friends. He hoped that the neighbors on the floor would become something like a company for him, but he was surrounded by either isolated loners or strange personalities who rarely left their rooms. The first few days passed quietly, although the atmosphere of the hostel caused slight discomfort. The corridors were dark even during the day, the light from the bulbs was dim, and their faint buzzing irritated the ear. One of the neighbors, Liz, who lived at the end of the hallway, once said, "Did you hear that a student has disappeared here?" The room was later closed, but they say that... She suddenly stopped talking and left, leaving Sam perplexed. In the evening, he decided to inspect the building. The corridors seemed endless, and the stairs were uncomfortable because of the low lighting. When he reached the end of the fourth floor, he noticed a door lined with wooden planks. It looked old, as if it hadn't been opened in years. There was a sign on the door with faded letters, "Room 413. Do not enter." Sam felt a chill. Why is this room locked? What's so special about it? But he pushed his thoughts away, deciding that this was just another oddity of the old building. At night, his sleep was interrupted by a strange noise. It wasn't a loud sound, but rather an elusive creak. He got up and went to the window, but the street was empty. He figured it could just be a branch brushing against the glass. The next day, he ran into a neighbor, a guy named Josh. He looked nervous and kept glancing over his shoulder. "It's always weird here at night," Josh said when Sam tried to start a conversation. "Especially near your room." Sam froze. Why by his room? He wanted to question Josh, but Josh hurriedly left. The next night, the noise was repeated. This time it sounded louder and came from behind the wall. Sam tried to figure out what could be making the sound, but found nothing. Then he decided to contact the building's caretaker. The watchman, a man in his 50s with a hard look, answered briefly. "Stay out of this, kid. Just sleep with earplugs if the noise gets in the way." The answer was strange. Why wasn't he interested in what was going on? Meanwhile, Sam began to notice that his things in the room were changing their position. The desk pen was on the floor, and the phone charger was gone, only to end up under the bed a day later. It looked like he'd put them somewhere himself, but Sam definitely remembered that he hadn't done it. A couple of days later, he found a strange piece of paper in his room. There was a scrawled handwriting on it. "Don't open the door if you hear a knock." Sam felt his hair stand on end. He looked around the room, but there was no one there. The door was locked, the window was closed. He decided to throw the note away, thinking it was someone's joke. That night, he was awakened by a loud knock. The sound was sharp and came from his door. Sam froze, his heart pounding. He didn't move, trying not to make a sound. The knock came again, harder this time. It seemed like someone was trying their best to get his attention. Sam went to the door, but didn't open it. Instead, he looked through the peephole. There was a man on the other side. More precisely, a silhouette, because his face was hidden by a hood. Sam backed away in panic. At that moment, the knocking stopped, but there were footsteps outside the door. They walked away towards the corridor, and then everything went quiet. The next morning, Sam asked Josh if he had heard anything during the night. Josh just shook his head and said, "You have to move out, Sam. There's something wrong here, especially with the room where the door is boarded up." Sam wasn't the type to get scared easily. After that night, he decided that it could only be someone's malicious joke. Perhaps one of the neighbors decided to have fun with the newcomer. But he still had the feeling that something strange was going on in the dorm. With the coming of the next night, he decided to prepare. He installed a small camera above the door, pointing it at the hallway. The camera was old, but it was supposed to record if someone tried to scare him again. When he went to bed, the camera was already working, but his thoughts kept him awake. What if Josh is right? What if there really is something in this place that everyone prefers to keep quiet about? That night, Sam heard the noise again. This time it wasn't a knock, but a light scratching sound, as if someone was dragging something sharp against the door. He froze, listening. The noise lasted for about a minute and then disappeared. In the morning, he checked the recording from the camera. What he saw made him go cold. The hallway was quiet. No one came to his door, but the sound of scratching was clearly audible. It was impossible. Someone was clearly there, but the camera did not record it. Sam began to suspect that it wasn't the people, but the building itself. Perhaps the old building is making sounds that could be mistaken for someone's actions. He decided to explore the corridor more closely. He went back to door 413, which was boarded up. She looked even more sinister up close. There were scratches on the doorframe, as if someone had tried to open it. There was dust at the bottom of the door, but clear shoe prints could be discerned among it. Sam couldn't resist running his finger over the scratches. It felt unpleasant, as if he was touching something dead. "You shouldn't be here." A voice came from behind him. Sam turned around and saw the watchman. The man looked at him with obvious annoyance. "Do you know why this door was closed? So that no one goes where they shouldn't. This is not a playground. Go back to your room." Sam tried to protest, but the guard wouldn't listen to him. The next night, something happened that he had never expected. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he was awakened by a scream. It was a woman's voice, full of panic. He rushed out of the room and saw Liz, his roommate, standing in the middle of the hallway and shaking. "What happened?" Sam asked, running up to her. There was someone there. In my room." Liz gasped in fear. Sam looked inside her room, but saw nothing suspicious. Everything was in place. There were no signs of forced entry. "Liz, are you sure? Maybe you imagined it?" "No, I saw him," she sobbed. "He just stood there and looked at me." Sam knew Liz wasn't the type to lose her temper easily. Something really scared her. He invited her to spend the night with him so that she could recover. Liz agreed, and they returned to his room together. When they closed the door, Sam took out his phone and checked the camera. There was nothing on the recording from the hallway. "It can't be a coincidence," he said. "Liz, have you heard anything about room 413? Liz froze. Her face turned white. You mean that door?" "Yes. There's something strange there." Liz hesitated, but told him anyway. "They say a girl lived there. She was found dead in that room a few years ago. They officially said it was an accident, but there are rumors that she did it to herself." Sam felt goosebumps rise on his skin. "Are you serious?" Liz nodded. "This room has been closed since then. No one goes there." The next day, Sam decided to act. He waited for the guard to leave the floor and went to door 413. This time he was ready. He took a crowbar he found in the back room and began to carefully remove the boards. The work was noisy, but his adrenaline was overpowering the fear of being caught. When the planks fell, an ordinary door appeared in front of him. Sam turned the handle, and the door gave way. The room inside was empty. There was a thick layer of dust on the floor, and the air was heavy, as if there hadn't been fresh air in years. He went inside and looked around. Everything looked normal: an old desk, a bed, a closet. But there was a notebook on the table. Sam went over and opened it. The first page was blank, but on the second he saw the entry. I can hear them coming. They won't leave me alone." His heart skipped a beat. Who wrote this? Sam carefully closed the notebook and looked around the room once more. She seemed completely ordinary, but the feeling of tension did not leave him. He started checking cupboards and drawers, but they were empty. The only thing that caught his attention was the strange smell. It was barely perceptible, but sharp, as if something was rotting. He followed the scent to the bed. Sam bent down and peered under it. At first glance, there was nothing there, just dust. But when he looked closer, he saw a small box. With trembling hands, he pulled her into the light. The box was old, wooden, with a worn lid. Sam opened it. There were photographs inside. The pictures showed different people, students, young and smiling. But their faces were disfigured by something. Someone had scratched them out with their nails or something sharp. In some of the photos, there were only holes instead of faces, as if they had been burned with a cigarette. Sam felt his stomach twist. Why are these photos here? Suddenly, he heard footsteps outside the door. They were slow but steady. Someone was approaching. He hurriedly put the photos back into the box and returned it to its place. Then he slipped out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. There was no one in the hallway. Sam quickly returned to his room and locked the door. "What did you find?" Liz's voice rang out, which was still with him. "Photographs," he replied shortly, still digesting what he had seen. "What kind of photos?" "People. Students. But their faces were disfigured." Liz paled. "That's crazy. Why would anyone keep such a thing?" Sam didn't say anything. He needed time to think about everything. The next day, he decided to contact Josh. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. "Have you been to that room?" Josh asked as soon as Sam mentioned 413. "Yes. I found photos there." Josh closed the door of his room and lowered his voice. "They say this place was connected to something not good. Someone used this room for their own business." "What business?" Sam interrupted him. Josh looked at him without blinking. "They say there was a guy there. Student. He was filming people on camera. I took photos. He had problems with his head. No one noticed anything until one day he disappeared. They say they found him in bad condition. And after that, the room was closed." Sam felt the blood drain from his face. "Do you think the photos I found belong to him?" "Who knows? Maybe. But it's better. Leave it alone, Sam. Trust me, you don't want to know anymore." Josh's words wouldn't leave his mind. Sam decided that he needed to find out the truth in order to end this restless cycle of suspicion. But that same evening, new events occurred in the dorm that forced him to reconsider his plan. At 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a loud knock on the door. Sam woke up abruptly. Liz, who was still staying with him, sat up in bed with a scared expression on her face. "Is that a knock again?" "What is it?" she whispered. "Yes, but this time." "It's too loud," Sam replied, getting up and heading for the door. He looked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. Then he turned on the camera mounted above the door. No one came to the door on the recording. Sam felt panic building inside him. He opened the door and looked out into the hallway. At that moment, someone ran from the end of the corridor, almost soundlessly, but fast enough to disappear into the darkness. "Hey, stop!" Sam shouted, but no one stopped. He returned to the room, slamming the door. "Who was that?" Liz asked, her voice trembling. "I have no idea," Sam muttered. He didn't sleep that night. Every rustle, every sound seemed suspicious to him. The next day, Sam decided to report the situation anyway. He approached the watchman, who listened gloomily to his story, but did not write anything down. "Listen, kid, I've already told you. Don't get involved in this. It's an old building, it makes noises. Forget about this room, and everything will be fine. But I've seen the photos. I hear footsteps. It's not normal. The watchman just shook his head. I'll tell you this, if you keep digging, you'll only get worse. Sam wasn't going to stop. In the evening, he went back to room 413. This time, he wanted to find some more clues. But when he got to the door, he saw that it was locked again, and the boards were put back in place. Sam froze. Who could have done this? He heard footsteps behind him and turned around. A man he hadn't seen before was standing there. He was a young man, with a strong build, wearing ordinary clothes. He was looking at Sam with a slight grin. "You're wondering what's in there, aren't you?" Sam nodded. "I advise you not to go in there. I'll just say that some things are better left alone. Especially in this place." Before Sam could respond, the man turned around and walked away. Later that night, Sam heard strange noises again, this time in his room. Liz had already gone to her room, so he was alone. The sound came from under the bed. He turned on the flashlight and looked there, but there was nothing there. Then he heard a whisper, as if someone had said his name. Sam couldn't believe his ears. He turned on the flashlight, searched the whole room, looked into every corner, but found nothing. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his hands were shaking. Perhaps he was just overtired and heard something that wasn't there. He decided to leave the room to clear his head and calm down. The hallway was empty, as it always was. The lamps flickered dimly, making an unpleasant buzzing sound. Sam walked forward a bit until he noticed that Liz's door was ajar. "Liz, are you here? Come on," he called. There was no response. He entered cautiously. Liz's room was in complete chaos. Things were scattered, the bed was rumpled, the window was open. Her jacket and phone were on the floor. "Damn!" he gasped, not knowing what to do. At this time, he heard a faint sound coming from the stairs. It was a moan or something like crying. Sam froze. He didn't want to go, but something made him go downstairs. It was cold and dark on the stairs. On one of the flights, he saw drops that looked like blood. Sam took out his phone, turned on the flashlight and followed the drops. They were leading him to a technical room on the ground floor. The door was ajar. He stopped, trying to collect his thoughts. All possible scenarios flashed through my mind, but the scariest thing was that Liz could be there. He braced himself and pushed the door open. It was damp and cold inside. The lights were barely working. He saw a figure among the pipes and old equipment. It was Liz. She was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees with her hands and rocking back and forth quietly. "Liz!" Sam shouted, running up to her. She lifted her head and he saw her face. She was covered in abrasions, her hair was matted, and her eyes were far away. What happened? Who did this? Sam tried to get an answer from her, but Liz just remained silent. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. Someone closed the door of the technical room. "Hey, who's there?" "Stop it," he shouted. There was no response. Sam rushed to the door and tried to open it, but it was locked from the outside. He started knocking, but no one answered. "Damn it, Liz, we have to get out of here," he said, but she still didn't react. Sam looked around for something to kick down the door with. His gaze fell on a heavy metal lever against the wall. He grabbed it and hit the lock with all his might. After a few blows, the lock gave way and the door swung open. He took Liz by the hand and dragged her upstairs, but the guard met them in the hallway. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, clearly scared. "Someone beat Liz up. Her room is all trashed," Sam blurted out. But the watchman just shook his head. "You don't really understand what's going on, kid. This place is dangerous. I told you to stay away from some places. You provoked all this yourself. What are you talking about? Sam was furious. It's just a building, and then someone attacked her. We need to call the police. Do you want them to come here? Are you sure? The watchman replied gloomily. Sam didn't understand what he was talking about. He decided not to argue and ran upstairs, dragging Liz with him. When they were in his room, Sam locked the door and tried to bring Liz to her senses. He gave her some water and asked her what was wrong, but she couldn't say anything. He called an ambulance and the police. The officers arrived and examined Liz, and she was taken to the hospital. But when it came to the investigation, things got weird. Your dorm is not officially registered, the police said. We can't find it in the database. What nonsense is that? It exists. We live here. Sam was indignant. The police officers looked puzzled. We'll check it out, but be careful for now. If something happens, call us right away. After they left, Sam was left alone. The room felt cold and alien. He decided to check again the recording from the camera that he made a few days ago. On the recording, he noticed one detail that he had missed earlier. The door of room 413, which was closed with blackboards, opened slightly as he passed by. Sam couldn't believe his eyes. The door of room 413, which he himself had seen boarded up, was slowly opening on the recording. Someone or something was inside. He leaned back in his chair, feeling his heart begin to beat faster. The cops, Liz, the watchman, it all got mixed up in his head. Why didn't anyone try to explain what was going on here? The next day, Sam decided to visit Liz again at the hospital. She looked a little better, but her gaze was still dim. Do you remember what happened? What is it? He asked, sitting down next to her bed. Liz nodded, but her lips were trembling, as if it was difficult for her to speak. I was in the room. Someone opened the window. Then I heard the door click, even though I was locking it. She trailed off, clutching the blanket. I didn't see his face, but he was there. I know he was there. Who? Liz, who was that? Sam insisted. She shook her head and then said softly, You have to leave. Just get out of here. Liz, that's impossible. I have no other place. Then stay away from this room. You don't understand. She didn't finish her sentence. The nurse came into the room and asked Sam to leave. Back at the dorm, Sam began to think about everything. Room 413 was clearly connected to all of this. He remembered Josh's words, the photos in the box, and Liz's words. Sam realized that he had to find out the truth, even if it would be dangerous for him. He waited until late at night, when everyone in the dorm was asleep. The hallway was quiet, except for the hum of the lamps that accompanied his footsteps. When he reached the door of room 413, he was overcome with fear. But he steeled himself and tried to open the door. This time it wasn't filled with boards. The handle gave way, and the door creaked open. The room looked the same as last time. Dust, an old table, a bed. But this time there was a video camera in the corner of the room. Sam came closer. The camera was old, but working. There were several scratches on its body, and there was a cassette inside. He took the camera and returned to his room. Plugging it into his laptop, he started watching the recording. At first, the video didn't show anything, just a dark room. Then a man appeared. A young guy dressed in a hoodie and jeans. He was staring straight into the camera, his face contorted with anger. Do they think they can just forget about me? He said to the camera. But I'll show them everything. The recording continued. The guy was pacing the room, muttering something. Then the door opened and other people entered the room. Their faces were blurred in the video, but they could be seen arguing. One of them pushed the guy, the other started screaming. Then the fight started. The camera fell to the floor, and all Sam could hear were thuds and screams. "The video is over." Sam leaned back, his hands shaking. Who is this guy? What was done to him? The next day, Sam went to Josh's place. "You knew about this, didn't you?" he threw, showing the camera. Josh sighed and looked out into the hallway to make sure no one was listening. "I told you to stay away. That's all it was, long ago. This guy, he lived in 413. He had problems with his head. I always thought he was being watched." The university tried to hush it up, but everyone knew that he had been driven. "Who drove him?" Sam insisted. "Other students. They mocked him, ruined his things. One day they came to him at night. Something went wrong. They say it was an accident. And the university just turned a blind eye to it? Of course I did. No one wants a scandal." Sam felt his stomach churn. Everything that had happened to Liz, to himself, had been the aftermath of that story. Sam decided that he needed to report this to the police. He went to the police station, took the camera and explained everything. The police didn't seem to believe him at first, but when they watched the footage, their faces became serious. "We'll investigate," one of the officers said. "But you'd better leave this place." "I'm not leaving until I know the truth," Sam replied. A few days later, Sam was called to the dean's office for an interview. There he was met by a man in an expensive suit. "We know that you handed over the video materials to the police," he said. "This can seriously damage the reputation of our university." "Are you serious?" Sam couldn't believe his ears. "Your dorm is a dangerous place. People are suffering because of what you're trying to hide." The man looked at him with a cold smile. "We will settle this, believe me. And you will receive compensation for your silence." "I'm not for sale," Sam replied, standing up. The man leaned forward and added softly, "Then you should be careful, Mr. Sam. You don't understand what you're messing with." Sam left the office, but something clicked inside him. He couldn't stay away any longer. The police investigation got to the news. The story of the guy in room 413 surfaced, and the university found itself in the middle of a scandal. Sam left the dorm, but his attempts to find out the truth changed his life forever. Every time he passes by the university building, he remembers that voice, the screams on the tape, and the empty room. The truth he was trying to uncover left more questions than answers.